At my husband's funeral, my son leaned in close, his breath warm against my cheek, and whispered, "You're next, old woman." Then he laughed quietly with his wife as if they were sharing a joke. My hands trembled. I wasn't sure if it was from the cold or from the words that had just carved a new hole in my chest. I didn't say anything. I just sat there, still, staring at the casket, pretending I hadn't heard. My husband, Richard, lay inside that polished wooden box with the same suit he wore on our wedding day. 42 years, gone. But somehow, in that moment, I wasn't grieving him. I was sitting in the middle of a war I hadn't even realized had started. When the service ended, everyone stood. I struggled a bit with my cane to get up from the pew, but before I could move, my daughter-in-law, Ashley, brushed past me. She didn't look at me. She didn't offer a hand. She just linked arms with my son, Aaron, and the two of them walked down the aisle together, heads high, like they were the ones being mourned. I followed slowly, my legs heavy. People offered their condolences, light touches on the shoulder, whispers of, "So sorry for your loss," but their eyes kept shifting past me. Hold on a moment before we move forward. Let us know where in the world you're watching from. And if you're loving these stories, don't forget to hit subscribe. Tomorrow's episode is going to be absolutely mind-blowing. They were looking at Aaron. He was the one who spoke during the eulogy. He was the one who held Ashley's hand and stood front and center. I wasn't asked to speak. I wasn't even asked to help with the arrangements. The burial was quiet. I stood by the grave, watching as the casket lowered into the ground. Ashley had on a pair of designer sunglasses and was tapping through her phone behind the minister. Aaron kept glancing around like he was waiting for someone more important to arrive. No one did. Afterward, there was a small gathering at their home. Not mine. My home had become too cramped for guests, according to Ashley. So we went to their place, the house I helped them buy 7 years ago when Aaron lost his job and they were between opportunities. I sold my bracelet and some bonds Richard and I were saving for emergencies. They never paid me back. I sat on the far end of the living room. No one brought me a plate. I didn't want one anyway. I just listened as Ashley talked loudly about renovations they planned now that things were moving forward. Her words, moving forward, hit harder than she knew. Or maybe she did know. Maybe that was the point. "Aaron," she said, sipping wine and scrolling her phone. "We should call the lawyer tomorrow and move the paperwork along. There's no point in waiting now." He nodded without hesitation. I kept my eyes on the carpet. The rug was one of the few things I remembered buying with Richard, a gift for their first anniversary. It still had the price tag stitched underneath. I had sewn it on myself, out of habit, because Richard liked keeping records of everything. Later, while everyone was still mingling, I asked Aaron if he could drive me home. He blinked like I had interrupted something important. "You should call a cab." "Mom," he said, "we're kind of busy here." "Busy?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. "I just buried my husband." He looked around, a little embarrassed. Then he leaned in close again, this time with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "You're making a scene." I left without saying another word. The house felt empty when I got home. I kept the lamp in the hallway on for Richard, always. I forgot that night. I walked through the front door and everything was dark. I sat on the edge of the bed and stared at the floor for a long time. I wasn't just mourning Richard anymore. I was mourning something else, something deeper. I didn't have a name for it yet, but it sat in my chest like a stone. The next morning, I went to the kitchen and found a stack of unopened mail. On top was a letter from the lawyer, Richard's lawyer. I hadn't seen him since the hospital. He told me then that everything would be handled with respect and clarity. I opened the envelope. Inside was a formal notice, a meeting scheduled for next Friday to discuss the estate. Ashley and Aaron were listed as co-beneficiaries. I wasn't. I stared at the letter for a long time. Then I read it again. I called the lawyer's office, but his assistant said he was in meetings all day. She promised to have him call me back. He didn't. That evening, Aaron came by, not to see how I was, not to check if I was eating or sleeping or managing the house alone. He came to pick up documents. He knocked once and let himself in. The key I gave him 3 years ago still worked. I hadn't changed the locks. "Hey, Mom," he said like nothing was wrong. "Ashley asked me to grab Dad's files. The will, the insurance stuff. Should be in the study, right?" I followed him down the hall. "Aaron," I said slowly, "why wasn't my name listed on the beneficiary document?" He didn't even stop walking. "Dad updated everything a while ago. Said it'd be easier if things were just in my name. Less legal mess. Don't worry, we've got it all handled." Handled, that word again. I stood in the doorway as he gathered the files. He was so comfortable in this house, like it was already his. I noticed he didn't ask permission to go through Richard's drawers. He didn't pause to ask if I was okay. He just moved with the confidence of someone who had already taken everything he needed. Before he left, he looked at me and smiled. "You don't need to stress about anything. Ashley and I will make sure you're taken care of." Taken care of. That night, I didn't sleep. I sat in the kitchen with a cup of tea that went cold in my hands. I thought about all the times I had bailed Aaron out of debt. All the times I'd looked after his kids, paid for school supplies, groceries, even car repairs. I thought about the times I defended him when Richard said he was spoiled. I thought about how many times I let things slide because he was my son. I thought about the way he looked at me at the funeral, like I was already gone. The next morning, I pulled out the lockbox from under the bed. It was heavy with paper, deeds, certificates, tax records, everything Richard and I had saved over the years. I began to read. I didn't know exactly what I was looking for, but I knew one thing. I wasn't going to let them bury me before I was dead. I wasn't going to be quiet anymore. I wasn't going to be handled. The morning after the funeral, I woke up at 6, out of habit. Richard used to start the coffee pot around this time, and I'd always hear the soft click of the kitchen light switch before the smell of cinnamon creamer filled the air. That morning, there was only silence. No light, no sound, just the familiar weight of an empty bed, and the realization that nothing in this house would ever feel the same. I walked to the kitchen and found the old wooden tray with the medicine bottles still lined up in the same corner, untouched since 3 days ago. I hadn't had the strength to clear it. I looked at the row of prescriptions, each one a small reminder of how we spent our final years together, between doctor visits and routines, grocery runs and pharmacy lines. As I poured myself a cup of coffee, I heard the front door open. I hadn't locked it the night before. I was too tired. The door creaked and I turned, expecting maybe the mailman. But it was Ashley. She stepped in like it was her own house. "Oh, you're awake," she said, setting down her designer tote on the kitchen table like she'd done it 100 times before. I came to grab the title to the Honda. "Aaron said it should be in your desk drawer." I didn't answer right away. "Good morning to you too," I said, my voice dry. Ashley smiled like she hadn't even heard me. "We're getting everything organized early. You know how paperwork can pile up if you don't deal with it immediately." She was already walking down the hallway before I could say anything else. I followed slowly, more out of instinct than anything else. The desk drawer wasn't hers to open. The car wasn't hers to claim. That Honda was the last thing Richard had bought under his own name. He hadn't even used it much, but that didn't seem to matter to her. To Ashley, it was just another box to check off. By the time I reached the room, she was already flipping through files. "Ah, got it," she said, pulling out the envelope. "Aaron will be at the DMV later, so this saves us a trip." She held it up like she'd just won a prize. I leaned on the doorway. "Ashley, that car's not yours." She looked up, her eyes bright and amused. "No, but it will be. I mean, it makes sense. You don't drive that much and Aaron's car is falling apart. It's just more efficient this way." "Efficient," I repeated. "Yeah," she said, brushing past me again. "We're just trying to get things done. No need to make this harder than it has to be." Harder than it has to be. That phrase stayed in my head long after she left. I spent the rest of the morning in Richard's chair, sorting through papers he left behind. His pension, our savings, the insurance policy. Most of it had his name first, then mine. I thought we had done everything together, but now it felt like none of it mattered. By early afternoon, Aaron called. He didn't ask how I was. He just asked if I had found the copy of the deed. "Deed to what?" I asked. "To the house," he said, like it was obvious. "Ashley said she didn't see it in the files. Just send it over when you get the chance." "The house is still in my name," I said. "Yeah, but that's temporary, right?" he asked. I mean, Dad always said it would go to me. I sat in silence for a moment. We didn't sign anything, Aaron. He was quiet for a beat. Then he sighed. Come on, Mom. Don't make this difficult. I've been handling all the bills the last few months. Remember? I did remember. But I also remembered the reason. He and Ashley had insisted we switch the utility accounts to their names to simplify things while Richard was sick. They said it would be easier to deal with paperwork if one of them passed. Now I understood why. Mom, he said again, we just want to move forward. You don't need to stress about all this. Ashley's been working with a lawyer to draft a simple transfer document. You just need to sign. It's mostly a formality. Let me think about it, I said, then hung up before he could answer. That night, I pulled out the file drawer from the closet in the spare room. It was full of receipts, contracts, everything we ever kept over the years. I found the original mortgage agreement from 1989, the one Richard and I signed together, back when we had nothing but his VA benefits and my hospital job to get us started. I stayed up until after midnight rereading it, along with Richard's handwritten notes in the margins. He had made a list of every repair we paid for, every tax year we filed jointly, and every change we made to protect this house. And now they wanted it like it was a piece of forgotten furniture. The next day, I decided to go to the lawyer myself. Richard's lawyer, not the one Aaron mentioned, not the one Ashley was working with. Mr. Calhoun was old, but he'd handled our affairs for over 20 years. His office was across town, tucked between a post office and a nail salon. I hadn't seen him since last fall, when Richard updated our medical proxies. He looked surprised when I walked in. Mrs. Whitaker, he said, standing slowly. I'm so sorry about Richard. I was planning to call. I sat down. I didn't waste time. Did Richard change anything in the will before he died? Mr. Calhoun blinked. No, why? Ashley and Aaron are saying everything goes to them. He opened a drawer, pulled out a red folder, and set it on the desk. The last update was 2 years ago. Richard asked that the estate go to you, with Aaron listed as a secondary beneficiary in the event of your passing. It's all here. Are you sure nothing changed? He looked confused. I would have known. They would have needed your signature for most adjustments, given joint ownership. I sat back in the chair, my heart pounding in a different way now. I left the office with a full copy of the current will and the property documents in a large envelope. When I got home, I placed the envelope on the kitchen table and stared at it. Then I did something I never thought I'd have to do. I picked up my phone and started recording. I hit record and held it up to my mouth. This is for the record, I said. This is Patricia Whitaker. If anything happens to me, if I fall, if I disappear, if I'm put in a hospital, this house and all attached property legally belongs to me as of today. I do not consent to any transfers or signatures made on my behalf. I ended the recording and saved it. Then I backed it up to an email draft. I didn't feel paranoid. I felt prepared. Later that evening, Ashley called. Hey, just wanted to check in, she said sweetly. Did Aaron mention the transfer papers? We can stop by tomorrow to get your signature. I'm not signing anything right now, I said. She was silent for a few seconds, then her tone changed. You're making this more difficult than it needs to be, Patricia. I smiled. So I've been told. I hung up. That night, I locked every door in the house. Then I sat on the porch with a blanket and watched their SUV drive slowly past my street. Just once. Just enough for me to notice. They were testing me, but they had no idea who they were dealing with. The next morning, I made myself a cup of coffee and sat at the kitchen table, staring at the envelope Mr. Calhoun had given me the day before. The truth was there, in writing, signed and dated. Richard had left everything to me. Nothing had been changed. And yet, Aaron and Ashley were moving as if they already owned the house, the car, and everything inside it. I hadn't slept much. I kept hearing Ashley's voice. You're making this more difficult than it needs to be, like a warning masked as politeness. That phrase had become her favorite, a tool she used whenever I didn't do exactly what she wanted. I didn't know what she or Aaron were planning, but I could feel it building. Something was coming. I just didn't know what it looked like yet. Around noon, Aaron showed up at the house. He didn't knock. He used his key again. When he saw me standing in the kitchen, he froze for a second, then smiled. Hey, Mom, he said, setting a folder on the table. I brought the transfer documents. I figured I'd walk you through them. I didn't ask for that, I said. I know, but it's easier this way. It's just a formality. Calhoun can update the deed later, but we need to get things moving. There's a lot to sort. I didn't sit down. He pulled out a pen and turned one of the pages toward me. This is the quitclaim form. Once you sign this, we'll have everything streamlined. Me and Ashley will handle the taxes, maintenance, insurance. Why would I sign this? I interrupted. He looked up at me, the smile fading. Because this is what Dad wanted. You know that. No, Aaron, I said. I know what Dad put in writing. And it's not this. He stared at me, quiet for a long second. Then he leaned back in the chair, crossed his arms, and exhaled. You really want to fight over this? I'm not fighting, I said calmly. I'm protecting what's mine. He didn't respond right away. He just packed up the folder and stood up. Okay, he said. We'll handle it another way. And just like that, he walked out. I didn't hear from either of them for the rest of the day, but by the next morning, I knew they were escalating. At 9:42 a.m., I got a call from an unfamiliar number. Hello? Mrs. Whitaker, this is Paula Cardenas from Cardenas & Lowe, attorneys at law. I represent your son and daughter-in-law. They've asked me to reach out regarding the estate transition. The estate transition is already documented, I said. Well, ma'am, she continued, my clients believe there may have been some confusion regarding recent documents and ownership intentions. They'd like to request a formal mediation to avoid further legal strain. What documents? I asked. I'm not at liberty to discuss details over the phone, she said. But I would recommend securing your own representation. We'd prefer to resolve this without court involvement. I hung up without another word. That same day, I called Mr. Calhoun and told him what happened. They're bluffing, he said. There's no legal ground. If you didn't sign anything and the current documents name you as the beneficiary, they're just trying to intimidate you. They're pushing hard, I said. He paused. Patricia, do you want me to draft a cease and desist? Yes, I said. And I want to make sure they can't take anything. Not without a court order. We spent the next 2 hours going over every asset. The car, the house, the bank account Richard left behind. Most of it was still frozen due to probate procedures, but the house was mine. It was protected. Still, the pressure didn't stop. The next day, I received a visit from a social worker. Her name was Tina McAllister. She showed up on my porch with a clipboard and a too-friendly tone. I am here on a wellness check, she said. We received an anonymous report that you may be experiencing confusion and that your family is concerned you're not able to manage your finances. I stood there, stunned. Who said that? I can't disclose that, she said. But I do need to come in and ask a few questions, if that's okay. I let her in. I had nothing to hide. She asked me about my medications, my eating habits, how I managed money, who checked in on me, and whether I felt safe. I do, I said, except when people try to take what belongs to me. She noted things on her clipboard and thanked me for my time. As she left, she looked back at me. I'm just doing my job, she said. But off the record, watch your back. This kind of report doesn't usually happen unless someone's trying to make a case. I closed the door and locked it. That evening, I sat in the den and looked through the original power of attorney Richard and I signed 5 years ago. I was the only one listed. Aaron had asked to be added during Richard's last hospitalization, but we never followed through. Now I was glad. The following morning, I went to the bank. I closed the joint savings Richard had left untouched for emergencies and opened a new account in my name. I transferred what was left, $12,400, enough to cover legal fees if this dragged out. I also placed holds on any withdrawals that weren't approved by me in person. I got back home and found a message taped to the front door. You're making this worse than it needs to be. No name, no handwriting I recognized, just block letters in black marker. I took it down and didn't call anyone. I didn't report it. I didn't give them the satisfaction of knowing it rattled me. But that night, I started writing everything down. Dates, times, conversations, voicemails, names. I created a paper trail. I scanned every letter, every document. I backed it all up on a flash drive and stored it in a coffee can under the sink. I wasn't going to lose my home. Not to my own son. Not like this. 3 days later, I received another call from Paula Cardenas. Mrs. Whitaker, your son has informed us that you're experiencing declining memory. If necessary, he's prepared to petition for guardianship. I didn't say anything. We'd like to avoid that, she continued. But you need to understand that refusing to cooperate may leave the court with no other option. So that was the plan. Paint me as senile, remove me legally, and then take everything. I hung up and called Mr. Calhoun. I want to file a protective order, I told him. You sure? He asked. Yes. And I want to make a formal declaration of competency while we're at it. If they want to fight, they can have it in court. He didn't try to talk me out of it. We scheduled a full evaluation with a doctor that same week. I passed it easily. 3 days later, Mr. Calhoun filed the declaration and sent copies to the opposing firm. After that, everything went quiet, too quiet. I knew they weren't done. People like Ashley don't stop just because someone says no. They wait, they plot, they come back around with something new. So I waited too, and I kept the original copy of Richard's will right beside my bed. 3 days passed after Mr. Calhoun filed the competency declaration and sent it to Cardenas and Lowe. I didn't hear a word from Paula Cardenas, Aaron, or Ashley. No calls, no letters, not even a cold text message pretending to check in. I expected some retaliation, some sign of movement on their end, but nothing came. The quiet didn't feel like peace. It felt like a setup. On the 4th morning, I drove to the grocery store. I kept my sunglasses on inside, hoping to move quickly through the aisles, grab what I needed, and get out. But as I pushed my cart past the refrigerated section, I saw Janet Hill, a neighbor from 3 blocks over, eyeing me like I had a sign taped to my back. She came straight toward me. "Patricia," she said, lowering her voice. "I heard something. I didn't want to believe it." I blinked. "What did you hear? That you're not well, that you've been forgetting things, that the family is taking care of everything now." My grip on the cart tightened. "Where did you hear that?" She shifted uncomfortably. "From Ashley, actually. At the hair salon. She said it during her appointment. Said they're managing things now, that it's been stressful watching you slip." I didn't say anything. I just nodded and walked away. Ashley was already planting the story, laying the groundwork, discrediting me in small conversations, soft tones, public spaces. I didn't need to be legally declared unfit if enough people around town believed I was. I went home without finishing my shopping. That night, I sat at the kitchen table and reread Richard's will again. Not because I didn't believe what I saw. I just needed to remind myself that it was real, that it hadn't all been in my head, that I wasn't the one losing control here. The next morning, I checked the mailbox and found a white envelope with no return address. Inside was a copy of a petition, a formal guardianship request filed by Aaron. It had been stamped 2 days ago. The reasoning, according to the form, was increasing signs of confusion, refusal to manage personal affairs, and potential financial mismanagement. I stared at the page for a long time. That was their plan all along. Paint me as incapable. Put everything under Aaron's control. Take the house. Move me to an assisted facility. Maybe not immediately. Maybe not openly, but eventually. Remove me inch by inch until I was gone from the picture entirely. I called Mr. Calhoun immediately. "We've got what we need," he said. "You've already passed the evaluation. We filed it first. This won't go anywhere, but we'll respond formally." "And what if they show up at the house?" I asked. "They can't force anything without a court order. You're still in full legal control." Still, I didn't feel safe. The following day, I installed a security camera over the front door. The technician didn't ask questions, just took my check and mounted the unit neatly under the eave. I watched the feed through the monitor on the kitchen counter for the rest of the evening. No movement, no visitors, just the breeze moving the hedges by the gate. Until midnight. That's when I heard the sound. A soft scratching. Not loud. Not panicked. Slow and deliberate. I froze in the hallway. I watched the monitor. At first, I saw nothing. Then a shadow. Someone moving behind the bush near the driveway. I held my breath and waited. The shadow crept closer, then disappeared near the front steps. I didn't go to the door. I didn't speak. I just stared at the screen. 30 seconds later, the camera caught him. Aaron standing at the edge of the porch with something in his hand. He held it up and pressed it against the camera lens. For a second, the view went dark. But then he stepped back and left. When I checked the recording the next morning, I saw what it was, a note taped to the lens. It read, "Sign, or we escalate." I kept the footage. I took photos. I printed them out and put them in the file with the petition copy. Mr. Calhoun told me to stay calm. "They're bluffing," he said again. "I don't think they are," I told him. "Then let's be ready." That same day, we arranged for an emergency court review. We brought all the evidence, the forged narrative, the surprise visits, the threatening messages. I gave a full statement under oath and presented the footage. The judge didn't rule yet. He wanted to allow the other side to respond, but the tone was clear. There was skepticism, not about me, but about them. "They're trying to force something that doesn't exist," the judge said. We left the courthouse without a final decision, but I felt a slight edge returning. That evening, Ashley called. I let it go to voicemail. Her voice was tense. "Patricia, this is getting out of control. We didn't want this. Aaron's just trying to make sure things don't fall apart. You're pushing this too far." I didn't respond. I saved the message, added it to the file. 3 days passed without contact. Then, early Saturday morning, I noticed the backyard gate was unlatched. I never leave it that way. I walked outside and found the shed open. Inside, the lockbox where Richard stored our original house title had been pulled off the shelf. The box was still there, empty. They had been inside the house. I filed a police report, but without forced entry, there wasn't much they could do. Aaron still had a key. I had the locks changed that afternoon. On Monday, I went to the county recorder's office and filed a formal affidavit of ownership. I included copies of the will, the living trust, the legal evaluation, everything. I placed an alert on the property that would notify me if anyone attempted a transfer or claim. I wasn't going to play defense anymore. The next day, I met with a civil attorney. We started drafting a restraining order. Not because I wanted to make a scene, but because the game had changed. They had made it personal. They had stepped into my house. They were counting on me being old, tired, and afraid. But I had nothing left to give them, and nothing left to lose. The locksmith finished changing the last deadbolt just before 3 p.m. I paid in cash. No receipts were left on the table, no paperwork sitting around. I didn't want anything traceable. Aaron had entered my home once with a key I gave him out of trust. That wouldn't happen again. I stood by the door after the locksmith left, checking each new lock. Front door, back door, garage. I tested them twice. The technician had offered to install a keypad lock system, but I said no. I didn't want codes. I didn't want electronics they could guess or reset. I wanted solid metal and a physical key, one that only I held. That night, I turned on the porch light and left it on. I sat in the den with the security monitor in view, flipping through paperwork. The folder had grown thicker, filled with every letter, voicemail transcript, and printed message since Aaron and Ashley started pushing for the house. I had also included photos of the shed after the break-in. Mr. Calhoun told me to keep everything, even if it felt small. Patterns matter in court. At 8:12 p.m., the camera picked up movement again. A car pulled up to the curb, engine running. It stayed there for 5 minutes, headlights off. I zoomed in. It was Aaron's sedan. I could see his profile in the driver's seat. He didn't get out. He didn't ring the bell. He just waited, then drove off. I added the time and license plate to my notes. The next morning, I emailed the footage to Mr. Calhoun. At 11:45 a.m., I received a call from his office. "They've backed down on the guardianship petition," he said. "Paula Cardenas sent a withdrawal notice this morning. They're claiming it was filed prematurely, that it was a misunderstanding." I didn't respond right away. "They realized they couldn't prove anything," he continued. "We've documented everything. The evaluation, your records, the home intrusion. This makes their case look weak, even manipulative." "So what now?" I asked. "We stay alert," he said. "They may pivot." He was right. That afternoon, I received a letter from the county property office. It was an inquiry into a request made by Ashley, a motion to initiate a family asset clarification, claiming there was confusion about ownership of the home and surrounding lot. It wasn't an outright claim, but it was close. A backdoor tactic. I immediately contacted the civil attorney I had met with before. She scheduled an appointment for the following day. When I arrived at her office, she already had the letter printed out on her desk. "This is a soft entry point," she explained. "They're testing whether anyone will object. If you don't respond, they can say you were notified, and that's where problems begin. It's good you came in." We filed an objection on the spot, including notarized proof of title and a full ownership affidavit. The motion was dismissed the next morning. No hearing, no process, just a note on the record. Request denied, documentation sufficient. Still, I knew they weren't finished. That Friday, I received a message from Ashley. It was a simple text. "We tried to do this the right way. Don't blame us for what happens next." I didn't reply. Instead, I forwarded it to the civil attorney. She added it to the restraining order request we were finalizing. The weekend was quiet. Too quiet. I stopped leaving the house unless absolutely necessary. I didn't trust their silence. I kept the monitor close. I double-checked locks. I changed my daily routines, moved where I kept the garage remote, started parking the car facing the street, made sure the curtains in the living room stayed closed at night. On Monday, I received a letter from the IRS. At first, I thought it was routine, but as I read it, my hands began to shake. The letter stated that I had been reported for suspicious activity involving property transfers and unreported income tied to estate consolidation. Ashley had filed a complaint. The timing wasn't random. She wanted to bury me in red tape, cost me time, force me into hiring accountants and legal help, wear me down until I gave up. I called Mr. Calhoun. He told me to breathe and bring the letter over. He reviewed it and explained what we needed to do. It would take time, but we had the documentation to prove the claim was false. I'd have to prepare records, organize bank statements, and have everything ready in case the IRS decided to move forward with an audit. "We'll clear this," he said, "but they're trying to bury you in stress." He was right. That night, I sat at the kitchen table surrounded by folders and receipts. Richard had always insisted on keeping everything filed, even receipts from gas stations and grocery stores. I used to make fun of him for it. Now I was grateful. I had a paper trail for everything. I worked late. Around 11:30 p.m., I stepped outside to take the trash out. As I walked to the curb, I noticed something strange. There were deep tire tracks across the lawn, not mine. Someone had pulled up to the side of the house, past the driveway. I scanned the area. No cars, no lights, just the tracks. I took photos, measured them, called the non-emergency line and filed a report. The officer who arrived looked barely 30. He asked me questions. The usual. "Do you suspect someone?" I didn't lie. "My son, his wife. He scribbled something in his pad. Do you have a restraining order?" "It's being processed," I said. He nodded. "Unfortunately, until that's in place, we can't do much unless they trespass directly. They already entered my shed. Took documents. The key they had wasn't theirs anymore." He didn't argue, but I could see the hesitation in his eyes. No one wants to step into family drama. Not unless they have to. He left after a few more questions. I stood at the edge of the lawn and looked at the empty street. I was tired. More tired than I'd ever felt. Not physically. Something deeper. I had been on defense for weeks. I hadn't slept through the night since Richard passed. The grief had been pushed aside, replaced by paperwork, threats, silence, and fear. I hadn't even had time to miss him properly. Back inside, I looked around the living room. Everything was still as we left it. The photo frames, the old armchair, the vase with fake flowers that Richard had insisted looked real. I sat down and picked up the frame on the mantel. It was from 1983. Richard was standing in front of the first house we bought. Aaron was barely 2. I had a hand on Richard's shoulder. We both looked young, not happy, just tired, but proud. Everything we had was built by the two of us, brick by brick. Now our own son wanted to erase all of it. That night, I opened a new bank account at a different institution. I moved every cent of savings I had, closed the old joint account, and froze any shared lines that could still be accessed. I added 2 emergency contacts. One was Mr. Calhoun. The other was my niece Rachel from Colorado. She was the only relative who had ever offered help without asking for anything in return. I didn't tell Aaron. I didn't tell Ashley. I wasn't going to speak anymore. They had declared war quietly. Now it was my turn to answer without saying a word. The next morning began like the others. I got up before sunrise, made a pot of coffee, and sat down with the same stack of documents I'd been sorting through for days. My kitchen table had turned into something between a war room and an archive. There were yellow folders, marked and color-coded, receipts sorted by year, photocopies of every piece of legal paper I could get my hands on. I didn't know what Aaron and Ashley would try next, but I wasn't going to be caught unprepared. They had already tried the courts, the IRS, social services, and even rumor. They'd pulled every thread they could find to see if something would unravel. Nothing had worked. Still, the silence worried me more than anything. By mid-morning, I received a call from Mr. Calhoun. "The restraining order is approved," he said. "It's valid for 1 year, effective immediately." He paused for a moment, as if to let it sink in. "I'll have a copy hand-delivered to both of them today. They can't come near your home, your property, or make direct contact." I closed my eyes and exhaled slowly. "Thank you," I said. He cleared his throat. "They'll probably push back. Don't be surprised if Ashley files some counterstatement. But at this point, legally, they're cornered. I just wanted you to hear it from me before they do." I hung up and sat still for a while. It didn't feel like victory, not yet. Just another layer of defense. Another wall between me and the people who once called me Mom and Pat. It didn't feel good. But it did feel safe. At noon, the delivery confirmation arrived. Both Aaron and Ashley had signed for their copies of the order. At 4:30 p.m., Ashley called from a new number. I didn't answer. She left a voicemail. "I hope you're happy. You broke this family for what? A house you'll die in alone? You turned your own son against you. You should be ashamed." I saved the message and forwarded it to my civil attorney. Later that night, while reviewing the bank statements one last time, I made a decision I'd been weighing for weeks. I called Rachel, my niece. She picked up on the second ring. "Patricia?" she asked. "Everything okay?" "Yes," I said. "Better now, actually." We talked for over an hour. I told her everything. What had happened since Richard passed, what Aaron and Ashley had tried to do, the lies, the forged petitions, the property claims, the late-night visits. She didn't interrupt. She just listened. "I can come out," she finally said. "You shouldn't be dealing with this alone." "I'm not," I said. "Not anymore." The following week, she arrived from Colorado. She didn't bring luggage, just a carry-on and a smile. She stayed in the guest room that used to be Aaron's. We took our time going through the house, boxing up old clothes, making lists of what I wanted to keep and what could go. "I'm not dying in this house," I told her. "I'm living in it." She smiled. "Good." Meanwhile, Mr. Calhoun finalized the creation of a private trust, a move I had initiated quietly with his help. The trust secured the house, the car, the savings, and all remaining assets. I was the primary beneficiary. Rachel was the successor trustee. Aaron and Ashley would never touch anything again. 1 week after the restraining order was delivered, Ashley filed a handwritten motion to overturn it. The court denied it in under 24 hours, citing the previous threats, the audio evidence, and the harassment history. No appeal was allowed. The next time I saw Aaron, he was standing at the far end of the supermarket parking lot. I had just loaded groceries into the trunk. He didn't walk toward me. He didn't wave. He just stood there, arms crossed, waiting for me to notice him. I didn't break stride. I got in the car and drove away. The following month, I heard through Rachel that Ashley had moved out of the house. The story was vague. Something about debt, a second mortgage they couldn't cover, rumors of a bankruptcy lawyer. I didn't ask for details. I didn't need to know. It wasn't my business anymore. My home had become quiet again, peaceful. I repainted the living room myself. I donated the old couch and bought a new one in a plain beige. I replaced the curtains, the lamps, even the rug, the same one I once gifted to Aaron and Ashley for their anniversary. I had taken it back quietly when I still thought we could talk things through. I no longer expected reconciliation. I no longer waited for apologies. One afternoon, as I was reorganizing the garage, I came across a sealed envelope with Richard's handwriting on it. I recognized it immediately. Neat, slightly slanted, always in black ink. Inside was a short note. In case you ever feel alone, remember this house was built for you. Everything we did, every sacrifice, it was so you'd never have to ask for a place in your own home. Love you, always. R. I sat on the step and read it 3 times. It was the only thing I had wanted to hear. Weeks passed, then months. No more letters, no more calls. Eventually, the security camera became less of a habit and more of a decoration. The folders were stored neatly in the hall closet. The trust was active. The house was under my name alone. And one morning, as I watered the garden in the front yard, I saw a small envelope in the mailbox. No stamp, no return address, just my name. Inside was a handwritten note, not from Aaron, not from Ashley. It was from my grandson, Ethan. Grandma, I don't know what happened, but I know what kind of person you are. I miss you. I hope we can talk someday. I didn't cry. I just folded the note carefully and placed it in the kitchen drawer, right beside the old house keys. Some bridges burn, others take time to rebuild, but now at least, I could finally choose which ones were worth crossing.